Hey, so I'm gonna try to speak in more of a customer servicey type voice for this one. Maybe it won't be as boring, but today I wanted to talk about sort of a really hippy dippy concept, being one with the entire cosmos. You know, that level of hippie. So, it's been said a lot by astronomers like Neil deGrasse Tyson, Carl Sagan, and pretty much anyone who is a sort of science or astrophysics sort of spokesman. But I very much prescribe to the idea that on some level or another, we are in fact part of the universe on some fundamental level which makes us one with the universe. I mean, it kind of goes without saying, but we are made of a lot of the same material that exists out in the cosmos. Like the iron in our blood happens to be the very thing that can actually kill a star, or in a way, kill a star. Once a star starts producing iron in its core, it's essentially, doomed. And it's the very thing which we use in our bloodstream in order to carry oxygen around. So, it's important. It's also a link between us and these enormous balls of plasma which exist far out in space. So, that's a connection which we tiny human beings have with the greater cosmos. But then, like, you go even more fundamental than that. The hydrogen which makes up H2O, which is essential to our bodies in order for us to be able to live at all, for any life to exist, that hydrogen, it's the core building block of every star in the known universe. So, again, another important element which is highly important to us and also important to distant cosmic entities, objects, stars, really. And then, so if you think about it in terms of elements, the very destruction of larger stars essentially gave rise to all of the elements which we need to exist and survive. And not only in terms of like the chemicals which comprise us human beings, but also the very place where we are. Our very solar system owes its existence to the death of supermassive stars. I mean, hypergiant stars whose supermassive really applies more to black holes. I tend to mix up words. Anyways, there's also the really much more fundamental fact that we are ruled by the same laws of physics as the rest of the universe. Sure, there are certain laws of physics which apply in different circumstances, and what I mean by that is that certain laws of physics are much more relevant in certain systems, certain closed systems, certain circumstances in the universe. So, the magnetism of the Earth or of our sun is a case of a sort of instantiation of a certain law of physics which we don't really see present in like our biological makeup, but that's just because we are we are of a different construction, we are a different sort of composition of elements. So and we're not enormous balls of hydrogen gas, so there's that. But still, the same laws of physics apply to us: the strong force, the weak nuclear force, the gravity, electromagnetism, and electromagnetism is pretty important to like the function of our brains and the very makeup of our entire bodies. And then you have, but even like the radioactivity, which comes as a result of the weak force. That's how we carbon date long dead animals and even human beings. So all of these fundamentals of physics and chemistry and the periodic table all apply to both ourselves and to the greater universe. So, in that way, there's no real distinction between the two, if you want to think about it in those terms. Like, I think I mentioned it a little bit in a previous video. We share one of the fundamental building blocks of living organisms with the vast majority of living organisms on the planet, that being RNA and DNA bases upon which our entire cellular structure is built. You know, we share that with the vast majority of living things on the entire planet. And according to evolutionary biology, we are most likely all related, distantly at least, to every other living being on the planet, back to what may very well be either a common ancestor or a group of common ancestors, which were all pretty much similar to each other. I think, most likely. I mean, it's hard to believe that it was probably just one instantiation of abiogenesis, but, you know, that's still sort of being worked out. So in that way, we're, even with, you know, the humble tree or, you know, blade of grass, we share something in common with every living being on the entire planet. And then on a chemical and you know, atomic level, we share our naturalistic structure with the whole of the universe. You know, we're comprised of quarks, which together make protons and neutrons. We have electrons, which separate in some instances, but also bind chemicals and other things together. You know, all of those things which are present in, let's say, any planet or star is present within us. It's just a different set of chemicals which comprise us, and therefore you get a different set of sort of natural laws which you see regularly being applied in terms of human beings, like, you know, long chemical chains like in amino acids, or, you know, lensing in our eyes, which can affect other processes in nature too, but, you know, there are certain processes which are important to us. But, you know, I guess to sort of smash them together, we live on a planet with gravity. Gravity affects us. It sort of dictates, you know, our bone structure, bone mass, how we get around, you know. I mean, if you're on the moon, you're hopping around because the gravity is different, and we're not really built for that sort of lower gravity environment. We're built for this one. And that's sort of a place where you can see, you know, biology and astronomy sort of meeting. It's a meeting of two very different sort of sciences in a situation which is extremely rare, even to this day. You know, human beings on the moon, that hasn't happened for quite a while now. But anyways, I'm going off topic. So in this way, we are one with the universe, but then there's this sort of deeper philosophical sort of consequence of that, in that we are not separate from the universe, even though we may think we are because of our intelligence, which oftentimes we think gives us some sort of, you know, vast difference to every other living being on the planet. But there are other intelligent living life forms on our planet, just not in the same way that we are intelligent. Maybe not to the same level, but there is intelligence amongst other species. And so if we're already trying to distinguish ourselves from other species because of our intelligence, we also try to do that even more so, I think, in my personal opinion, when it comes to the rest of the cosmos. We think that our intelligence or our conscious experience separates us in some way from the rest of the universe, but it doesn't. Every process which allows you to have a thought is dictated by the laws of physics. It's because of the laws of physics that you are able to think in the first place. It's because of the way chemistry works and electromagnetism and the way neurons fire, all based on chemistry and how electrical signals move between synapses within our brains. So, you know, they're fundamentally linked in a way that can never really be denied. if you really think about it. I mean, if you accept the same physical and natural processes which, you know, dominate the entire universe also dictate the way we function on on just a very, base level. And so it kind of makes me think of the idea that Carl Sagan put forward, where, um, the idea that we are essentially the universe experiencing itself or coming to understand itself. I'm probably getting the quote wrong because I'm just trying to think of it off the top of my head. But I feel like maybe to a certain extent that's true, because it almost, I'm probably understanding it incorrectly, but it sort of makes it sound like he's saying that we're sort of a representation of the entire universe trying to understand itself, but it feels more like a piece of the universe has gained consciousness and is now trying to understand the rest of itself, or a portion of the universe trying to understand the rest of the universe. Because I feel like if you say it in a way, if you say it in that way, that we are the universe trying to understand itself, it almost elevates us or puts us on a level which I don't think is really warranted. But then at the same time, I understand what he's saying, because we are a part of the universe. We are trying to understand the universe, and so in that way, it makes sense what he's saying. We are the universe trying to understand itself because we are fundamentally a part of the universe. It's just, I guess, the way it's phrased makes it seem like it's on a level that's much more grand, then seems appropriate, putting us on a pedestal that I don't know if we really deserve. But I mean, maybe I'm wrong in sort of downgrading us in that way, because we, as human beings on this tiny little mote of dust, to sort of refer to Carl Sagan's quotes again, we're on this tiny mote of dust trying to understand a cosmos that is so enormous that it's beyond our comprehension, potentially. And yet from that tiny little mote of dust floating in a beam of sunlight, we've managed to possibly figure out deep truths about a universe which dwarfs us in ways that we can barely even imagine. And that's pretty incredible, even for what we've managed to accomplish so far. Just thinking in terms of where we've gotten so far, that's pretty incredible. And then it sort of recontextualizes the idea of the universe understanding itself. I don't necessarily believe in a consciousness that exists outside of the universe. The whole thing about God that I was talking about in the conceiving of the divine. But if you think about it in terms of human beings with our consciousness trying to understand the rest of the universe, and sort of our consciousness being a unique and sort of beautiful thing in the cosmos, in what is otherwise an unthinking and uncaring and a non-living universe, that you have these tiny creatures, us, which are able to take this sort of gift of consciousness and knowledge and intelligence and apply it so that we can understand the rest of the natural universe. That's incredibly profound, and it's awe-inspiring. It's also quite humbling too, because we are just these tiny specks in a immense universe, but it's an immense universe of which we are a part. And so I think in that way it's sort of natural that we would want to get to know it. If we are the universe sort of experiencing or trying to understand itself, then it would make sense that we have this drive to know more. I would hope that as a species we would have a drive to understand the universe around us, considering that it is everything. It is all that there is. It surrounds us. It envelops us. It is a part of us. We are a part of it. It's the all-encompassing infinitude of the cosmos, as I put in my About section. But and the reason I sort of wrote it that way is because I feel like it's essentially true. It is everything, everything, including us, including everything we've ever done, all of time and space. We exist within that fabric, within that framework, with functioning under those physical laws, existing in energy and force fields, which essentially give us our existence. Sure, that, and also the abiogenesis, evolution, the Big Bang, every other natural process, but all of those natural processes are born out of physical laws and the constants such as the speed of light and other constants which are essentially vital towards understanding how this universe which we exist in really works. And all of those sort of physical laws also apply to us. Every law of chemistry, we abide by those same physical laws, and we are made of that same matter. I don't know, I'm probably rambling at this point, but it's just sort of a mind-boggling idea if you really kind of stop and think about it, that there is no real difference between us and the rest of the universe. Our intelligence, sure, but even our intelligence, even we as human beings, as I mentioned in my acceptance of impermanence video, that may not be a permanent thing. And then once we do inevitably die, all of our atoms, everything that comprises this physical body, in one way or another, will essentially return to the universe in a way which makes the distinction between us and the rest of the universe even less clear, or less sort of arguable. Because once you've essentially, let's say like you choose a natural burial, eventually you will just return to the earth. Your body will decay, your atoms will essentially become reconfigured and recombine into the dirt. Then your nutrients from your body will be used by whatever plant can make use of it. You'll fertilize the soil, or it could be food for any animal or plant which uses decomposition to feed itself. The decomposing, very vital living beings which keep our entire ecosystem running, essentially. Fungi come to mind, but also bacteria, flies, all of those sort of decomposers which are important to the life cycle of all of natural life. And then once that happens, and you've been used by the earth, by other living beings, your body has decomposed, you'll in a sort of biblical sort of parallel, you become dust. And again, this isn't me lending any credence to the story of Genesis, but if it gets at least one thing right, we come from dust and eventually return to dust. It's funny because a lot of times creationists will sort of deny the idea that we living things, we thinking things can be what can come about out of non-living, non-thinking things, and yet that's exactly what happens in Genesis. God breathes life into dust, to a non-living thing, and from there creates living things. It's just like with outside of the sort of biblical idea, I'm just saying that that happened. We came about from non-living things. We came about through a very long process, a very long, complicated process, which resulted in us in this long evolutionary chain. It's lacking the God and the creator and the intelligent designer, and in its place, since we don't have proof for that actually being the case of how we got here, we have, you know, scientific theories backed up by evidence which show that we came about as a result of natural processes. And and then a part of those natural processes, ironically enough, includes non-living things eventually being stirred into this sort of chemical sort of boiling pot of the primordial earth, filled with all sorts of amino acids, thanks to processes which predate life, creating life. And it's an amazing thing. And then once that life has reached its end, it returns to not being a sort of a composite of non-living things, which slowly but surely become part of the world again, part of the non-living world again, but also being used by other living things. And then once all of that has come to its end, once all life comes to its end, it all just returns to the universe in some way, as in the form of dust, in the form of particles, atoms, subatomic particles even, if you really want to think about it all the way down to those terms. So, it's interesting. It's deeply sort of worldview altering, depending on the circumstance. And for me, so this is why I'm sort of concluding this as sort of, nature, appreciation of nature from the atheist perspective, sort of part 2, which I include in the description, is because you can get all of this sort of deep sort of connection to the universe and to all the things which are around you, everything living and non-living, without the need for like a divine being. Sort of, to defend myself as a non-believer, but to still have a sort of deep, profound love and appreciation for everything around me. To appreciate its beauty, its complexity, its very existence, my very existence. All of that in the context of naturalism. I love naturalistic poetry, and I will always would say I'm not a naturalist in the philosophical or scientific sense, you could say, or I wouldn't commit to it 100%, because as an agnostic atheist, I would still leave room for the possibility that I'm wrong. But given that we don't have evidence to substantiate supernatural or the divine, we're left with the natural. And even with just the natural, you have all of this. Our Earth, our sun, our solar system, our universe, and our connection to it all. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So, thank you to anyone who watched, eventually. And that's gonna be it. Hopefully the next one I do will probably be like the afterlife, maybe? I don't know. Let's see what happens. And bye-bye.